Pakistan was based on an anti-Hindu idea. It's not a Hindutvadi conspiracy. It's not an Islamist delusion. It is a fact. The two-nation theory, again, you need to understand that the two-nation theory not only said that Muslims and Hindus are two different communities. You could argue that Muslims and Hindus are different as people. Shias and Sunnis are also different. People can be different. Difference is not the problem. The second half of the two-nation theory is the problem, that Hindus and Muslims are different and cannot live together. That was the problematic bit, and that was constantly rammed in by Jinnah and the Muslim League. So the foundation of Pakistan absolutely was anti-Hindu. There is simply anyone with an ounce of honesty and integrity cannot dispute that.
Hi, this is Khalid Beg, and welcome to yet another episode of India This Week by Amana and Khalid. We're joined yet again by Arshia Malik. It's her fourth episode with us. We do try to call her very regularly. We always tell her that we want to have you the most regular one after Abhijit, but she's very busy. She writes 3 articles in 5 days for News 18 and for Swaraj and for New Indian. Then sometimes the blog comes in Times of India, and then she doesn't have the time. So viewers, it's not our fault, it's Arshia Malik's fault. Okay, and we are very thrilled to have Kunwar Khuldene Shahid, a journalist from Pakistan whose writings I've really been following in the last few years. He is the principal correspondent for The Diplomat in Pakistan. He writes on a host of issues and is one of the most liberal, progressive voices from there. And our first Pakistani citizen on our podcast. So that's the first distinction. So Shahid, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Khalid, for inviting me. I've been a huge admirer of all 3 of you, and I had no idea I'm the first Pakistani, so that's even bigger honor. And I hope I can contribute something meaningful to the conversation.
All right. So now that we are all here, the topic, as you can see, it is about understanding Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and somewhere all our lives are shaped up or affected even today by his ideology, by the decisions he took. And what is interesting is that I think this is the ideal panel. We've always wanted to shoot this episode with Arshia, and now to have Shahid is like, icing on the cake. A Pakistani a Pakistani who's wanting to make Pakistan a secular, liberal, progressive place, and an Indian here who wants to fight the Islamist communist and make that community secular, and hence, add to the larger secular fabric of India. So to understand from these 2 people how they view Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So, of course, nobody, at least in the subcontinent, needs any introduction about Muhammad Ali Jinnah. But I want to first start from you, Shahid, that when I was researching about Muhammad Ali Jinnah, it's a very privileged background that he comes from, a very rich mercantile family. Even, when the British was there, it's not that he was amongst those hundreds of undivided Indians who were oppressed. I mean, here is a guy who went to the best of schools, first in Bombay, then Karachi, then he goes to the famous Lincoln Inn to study law in UK. Even today, anybody going there, it's a big deal, right? So, पैसों की कमी नहीं थी, privileged background था. Even there are anecdotes where, he wouldn't like that gilli danda, and, he would tell them be clean, and, he had these 200 suits later on. Do you think, Shahid, someone who has been objectively critical of the founding father of his own country, was that also one of the reasons where the frame was a little bit elitist and it did not resonate with the middle class and the larger poor strata of Hindus and Muslims for Jinnah? Is that a worldview which cut him off from a lot of realities?
Listen, Khalid, one can blame Jinnah for a lot of things, and I mean, I've written a lot about Jinnah. But I think being privileged is not something that one could hold against him, in the sense that if you look at not just British India, all British colonies, once the British left, pretty much every single part of the world that they conquered were left in the hands of the elite. So Jinnah wasn't unique in the sense that he was part of the elite. It was pretty common in the day. Even the Congress was, was filled with leaders who you can call the elite. I think his crime was, and again, if you talk about understanding Jinnah, I think it became his motivation, political motivation as well. It was not that he was elite, it was just that he had complete disconnect from the average, with the average Indian. And this became a reality check for him once Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi came to India, because Jinnah had envisioned himself as, I mean, till the 1910s, he was the quote-unquote ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. He had no interest. He was condemning the Muslim League. He was condemning communal politics. But once Gandhi enters into the fray, all of a sudden Jinnah's politics changed. And why was that? Again, both Gandhi, Jinnah, both from Gujarat. I believe they're from adjacent districts originally as well. And again, similar professional background, both were considered pretty close to the British establishment and all of that. But the crucial difference between the two, and this was exposed in, I think it was a rally somewhere in Gujarat, a Congress rally. This was a time when Jinnah was a member of both Congress and Muslim League. And he was addressing the Congress rally in 1917. And Gandhi asked him to address it in Gujarati because they were both Gujaratis. They were talking to, and Jinnah couldn't do that. Jinnah couldn't speak Gujarati. Jinnah couldn't speak Urdu. But he continued in English, and he was heckled by the audience. And that's when he realized that the disconnect he had with people within Gujarat itself. I mean, Gandhi was basically telling him, without saying as much, that you are not someone who can even represent Gujarat. How on earth are you going to represent India? And I think that was his biggest flaw, that he did not make any effort to even connect with the average Indian, first and foremost. And even later on in his career, when he became a complete Muslim separatist, he had a whole entourage of leaders who were responsible for dealing with the masses. He was just at the top of them. Again, how would he communicate with people when he couldn't even speak their language? So I think that is the fundamental issue that he had, and maybe that resulted in an individual complex and all of that. We can obviously talk about that later. But I think just being elite wasn't the problem. The problem was that he did not do enough to connect with the average Indian or the average Gujarati or the average Muslim even, or after the creation of Pakistan, the average Pakistani. I think that's a bigger flaw in my opinion.
Arshia, do you agree with that analysis, or you have a slightly different take about his privileged background and not being able to?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, who are constantly, as Kashmiris, having had to suffer the creation of another Islamic state, the leader matters, right? And if you don't have a believing leader, a practicing Muslim, I have tried to, go into it. How on earth did he become a, political leader and the creator of a nation based on Islam, a religious identity? So for me, it's more of a reflection of the Muslim community. At that time, British India Muslim community, now Pakistani Muslims and Indian Muslims themselves. It's more of a reflection of them, that they prefer to choose anybody, even if he's not a believing person, to lead them in the creation of an Islamic state. So I agree with Shahid. Absolute disconnect. And my elders in the family often used to quote that particular rally, I believe. They say कि वहीं पे उसने पकड़ लिया था कि Muslims are not going to have much rights there. This is the the Muslim version of it, and that is when he started thinking of a separate place for Muslims. But the disingenuity of it, now that you start digging into his motivations and the speeches and exactly what the Urdu press was talking about it's to profess to fight for the rights of Muslims. I mean, all along this career which started for the creation of Pakistan, starting from the defense of Ilmuddin. Remember, Ilmuddin murdered Mahesh Rajpal, the publisher of the book Rangila Rasool, which was not written by him, written by somebody else. And then to defend him in court. And all his defense is about defending his rights. Forget the principle of, that violence should not be used and all. So starting from there, this constant assertion that I am fighting for the rights of Muslims. And as Shahid said, he didn't have any connect with them, with the actual Muslims on the ground. But then his entourage, all of them, Sohrawardi, I think, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, and Iqbal, and, all of them, even the Ahmadiyya elites, they were the ones who started distributing this idea of Pakistan to the masses. Remember, Venkat Dulipala wrote the book that it wasn't insufficiently imagined. It was sufficiently imagined, ambitiously envisioned, and all efforts were done to, distribute the idea to the masses, and they found a lot of support in it. So yes, absolutely. Somebody, complete contrast of his personal life. Pork eating, cigar smoking, never entered to pray. And even after the creation of Pakistan, there's an anecdote that he had started to enter the mosque with his shoes. So complete disconnect with his own religion as well. The very religion that became the basis for the creation of Pakistan and West Pakistan, East Pakistan. So yeah, agreed with Shahid.
Right. Amna, your question?
अर्शिया दी, मेरा एक सवाल ये है कि न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स में एक आर्टिकल छपा था जिसमें लिखा था कि जिन्ना की जो लाइफ स्टाइल है वो थी बहुत सेक्युलर, बट स्टिल एक एलिमेंट था उसके अंदर जो कि प्रॉफिट को काफी रिस्पेक्ट से देखता था. इनफैक्ट कहा जाता है कि जो उसने ज्वाइन किया था ये बिजनेस छोड़ करके जो लॉ कॉलेज ज्वाइन किया था, क्योंकि उसने ये अफवाह सुनी थी कि कॉलेज के गेट पे प्रॉफिट का नाम है, which he went to see also, but उसको मिला नहीं कहीं पे. But that was the starting point for him to switch his career as well. लेकिन फिर भी उसके बाद हम जो देखते हैं उसका एक बहुत ही सेक्युलर अप्रोच था. इवन हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी की बात करता था, एंड ही इवन यूज्ड टू टॉक अबाउट, हाँ, वैल्यूज बहुत ही ब्रिटिश वे में थे, मतलब काफी ज्यादा एंग्लोवाइज वर्जन था. लेकिन सम वे खिलाफत मूवमेंट के अगेंस्ट था वो. लेकिन सम वे हम देखते हैं कि जब खिलाफत मूवमेंट हो रहा था एंड गांधी ने भी खिलाफत मूवमेंट को सपोर्ट किया, which is also called like marriage. एक उसकी इंटरेस्ट की मैरिज हुई थी, क्योंकि कुछ आइडियोलॉजिकल फ्रंट पे कुछ भी लेना देना नहीं था दोनों का साथ में. खिलाफत मूवमेंट वाज टोटली डिफरेंट, इट वाज नॉट अबाउट द इंडियन फ्रीडम मूवमेंट. लेकिन उसके बावजूद हम एक पूरा वो देखते हैं, जिन्ना के जो पर्सनालिटी में पूरा चेंज देखते हैं, एंड फ्रॉम अपोजिंग खिलाफत मूवमेंट, और वो वही बंदा पाकिस्तान के क्रिएशन के लिए जिम्मेदार है. तो हाउ डू यू एक्सप्लेन इट, हाउ डू यू एनालाइज इट, कि क्या रीजन था? क्योंकि सडनली बहुत ज्यादा वो इस्लाम पैन इस्लामिस्ट में बिलीव करने लगा, ऐसा कुछ तो हुआ नहीं होगा. सो व्हाट वाज द रीजन?
This is something Shahid can tell you much better, but I have also tried to look into it.
You start, then Shahid can come in.
Kyunki, as I said, not a believer, not a practicing Muslim, completely westernized with all those Savile Row suits and everything. So what exactly prompted him? It's again the very thing ki Islam started becoming the political language at that time. 1940s का आप जो रन अप देखोगे ना 247, मतलब 1940 में जो लाहौर रेजोल्यूशन है, 7 साल लगते हैं फिर पूरा क्रिएशन में. यस, ब्रिटिश इज पिवटल ऑफ क्रिएटिंग इट, लेकिन वो जो सारा डिबेट चलने लगा वो रैलीज में, और उन दिनों के जो अखबार हैं, अगर आप क्लिपिंग्स देखोगे, एक पूरा एंटोराज जो उनका था वो वो आइडिया ऑफ पाकिस्तान डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर रहा था टू द मासेस, एंड दे वर फाइंडिंग सपोर्ट. दूर दूर के इलाकों से वो जो लेटर ऑफ ओपिनियन आता है, लेटर टू द एडिटर आता है, वो आ रहा था उर्दू प्रेस में. तो जिन्ना का ये एज यूजुअल जैसे इस्लामिस्ट करते हैं, यू स्टार्ट रियलाइजिंग द पावर ऑफ इस्लाम एज अ पॉलिटिकल टूल. And even though you keep telling the masses it's like his speech, even after the creation of Pakistan, it's a secular speech that, go to your temples and pray and you'll be safe and all. But ये जो था ना कि I need to defend the rights of the Muslims. आप जब इसको एक इस्लामिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट में करते हैं कि अगेन इफ यू आर क्रिएटिंग पाकिस्तान एंड देन यू आर सेइंग दैट इट विल बी शरिया गवर्न्ड, व्हिच मींस इट्स एन इस्लामिक स्टेट. सो वंस इस्लाम बिकम्स योर पॉलिटिकल लैंग्वेज, which happened actually, Ahmadis were supporting it, but they were the first target because you created that Islamic language, and usme Ahmadi will be the first people who are going to be targeted and ostracized and ये exterminated. तो ये है कि आपने एक वो पॉलिटिकल पावर के लिए आपका सारा वो जो अंटोराज था, एंड गांधी स्टार्टेड सपोर्टिंग द खिलाफत. Politically, you felt it was a viable thing. UP के जितने भी यहाँ पे elders हैं, I keep meeting them, and even though this is out there among the Muslim modernists in Aligarh Muslim University, in fact, even many Hindu veteran journalists are also saying the same thing. कि 1946 के election में they didn't have adult franchisee. लेकिन when you go to these areas जहाँ पे they migrated out of UP, you see that the elder sons all stayed back. It's the second son and the third son who migrated to Pakistan, right? So वो जो property का फिर वो जो बंटवारा actually में था, they stayed back. The eldest son stays back, and very deviously they, made the second and the third one leave so that they could have, the land would be there and बहुत सारे positions मिलने वाले थे government में. ये सारा था. 1960s तक माइग्रेशन हो रहा था हमारे ही subsidized education लेके हमारी elite institutions से, and they were going and finding government jobs there. So this idea that it was a secular पहले थे, I don't think so. I think it was just rhetoric उसकी speeches में, and then to say that the Muslims in India will have a protective umbrella over them, kind of like a hostage thing कि यदि उनके साथ कुछ हुआ तो हम भी हैं, हिंदू भी यहाँ पे हैं. I think वही था. Islam as a political tool is a very powerful drug, and time and again हमारी अपनी history में Kashmir has shown it. All these internal insurgencies keep showing it. But I would like to hear what Shahid has to say. I think he can explain it much better. What happened? How did he change?
देखिए आमना, आपने जो सवाल पूछा मैं पहले उस पर आता हूँ कि आपने पहले बात की जो मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना थे, उनकी जो एक अकीदत थी या वाबस्तगी थी जो पैगंबर इस्लाम के साथ, तो वो उस पर देखें बहुत सारी मनगढ़ंत कहानियां हैं जो इस्लाम परस्त हैं या इस्लामिस्ट हैं, उन्होंने जिन्ना के बारे में बनाई हुई हैं. और ख़ासतौर में उनमें जो कदर मुश्तरक ये बात है कि जी जिन्ना साहब की हमारे जो पैगंबर हैं उनको लेके बहुत एक खास एक अकीदत थी. ये भी कहा जाता था कि जी पाकिस्तान बनाने का तो ख्वाब ही उनको ख्वाब में आए थे पैगंबर इस्लाम, और उन्होंने कहा था कि पाकिस्तान. तो ऐसी बहुत सारी कहानी है. मैं ये नहीं मान सकता कि जो साहब ये फरमाते थे मस्जिद में बैठ के नमाज पढ़ते थे कि हाँ भाई मैंने ठीक, अपने इर्द गिर्द तो पूछते थे कि भाई मैंने सही पढ़ी है नमाज ना, तो अगर कोई किसी अगर किसी भी किस्म की उनकी कोई प्रॉफिट से कोई एफिलिएशन होती तो उनको जो बुनियादी नमाज कैसे पढ़ते हैं इससे ज्यादा बेसिक तो बात नहीं होती मेरे ख्याल में किसी भी मुसलमान. लेकिन जिस तरह हमारे जो इस्लामिस्ट हैं, इस्लाम परस्त हैं, उन्होंने एक जिन्ना की तस्वीर खुद से गढ़ी है. In the same way, you have liberals in Pakistan who have fabricated a secular Jinnah. For instance, you mentioned the Khilafat movement. I think one of the biggest myths in Indian history is that Jinnah did not support the Khilafat movement. Yes, he did not support the Khilafat movement itself, but Jinnah was part of the delegation in 1919 and 1920, part of a delegation of Indian Muslims that went to the UK to condemn British disintegration of the Ottoman Empire. And he said, and I quote, that this directly impacts our faith. How does the fate of the Ottoman Empire impact the faith of the Indian Muslim? So he was representing the Muslim case, not just the Muslim case against the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. He was fighting it through religion. So the argument, going back to the argument that I think at personal level, he had absolutely no knowledge of Islam or the Prophet, but yes, in the 40s, he repeatedly mentioned that, Prophet gave us the flag of the Muslim League. We learned democracy 1300 years ago through Islam. And he said all those things that were needed. But personally, he was absolutely, he used religion as early as the 1920s, because he condemned Khilafat movement. This goes back to his disconnect from the masses. He condemned Khilafat movement because Gandhi was supporting it. And Gandhi, again, you see, as a politician, you play to your strengths. Gandhi's strength was, and it became quite obvious, to rally people. Jinnah's strength was never that. Even in his peak, it was, again, like I said, he required other people to bring the people, bring the masses together. So his issues with mass protests was because that wasn't his own strength. And then Arshia, I think you mentioned the case of Ilmdeen. Now, the case itself would be problematic itself. I always mention that all issues in Pakistan today, every single one of them, we can talk about them one by one, although it will take quite a few hours, but every single thing can be linked to Jinnah's action. So the blasphemy law in Pakistan and its use, Ilmdeen is a cult figure in Pakistan. Ilmdeen is someone who's not only a part of folklore. The foreign office in Pakistan and the hostel that is designed to house budding diplomats, foreign policy officials, It's called Ghazi Ilmdeen Shahid Hostage. So it's not just, fringe people who support Ilmdeen. He is a saint in Pakistan. Jinnah defended him in court. Again, he could not defend him in the sense that obviously he murdered, he committed the murder in broad daylight, but his case was that you should reduce the punishment. Now, this was 1929. And in 1929, around the same time, you had Jinnah giving his 14 points. So he's very much a politician. And even at that time, he's officially arguing for a united India. And yet he's increasingly gradually, from the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, the start of the 1920s, till the end of the 1920s, when he's defending Ilmdeen as a lawyer. A lot of people who defend him say, oh, he's just a lawyer defending a case. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a politician who wanted to lead all of Muslims and Indians. So even if he fought the case as a lawyer, he should have at the very least condemned the action later. He actually downplayed his case in defense of Ilmdeen, was that the gravity of the case is less because of his age. And let's not forget, 5 years before Ilmdeen murdered Mahashe, I'm sorry, you mentioned the name, was Rajpal was the name, right?
Mahashe Rajpal.
Rajpal, yeah. 5 years before that, you had the massacre in Kohat over blasphemy. The entire population, Hindu and Sikh population, was absolutely cleansed. I think 3,000, 4,000 people were cleansed in September 1924 over blasphemy. So blasphemy was a core issue, core communal issue. Why would someone interested in Indo-Pak politics, Indian politics at the time, why would someone take that case? And why wouldn't they not condemn the action later on, unless they knew that there was some political mileage to gain out of it?
And you can connect it to the happenings in 2022 as well, Khalid, Nupur Sharma's case. Even in Pakistan itself, Salman Taseer's murder, for defending a Christian woman. So all of this, Jinnah's ghost hasn't left us as yet. It hasn't. Even for that matter, 1989, banning Salman Rushdie's book, that's again blasphemy thing. Although Indian Muslims did not know it had been published, nobody had read it, India was still the first country to ban. Why? Again, because Muslim League 2.0, the Muslim modernist from Aligarh Muslim University, who happened to be in the Congress party, that would be Rafiq Zakaria. He created a ruckus, and Rafiq Zakaria is Farid Zakaria's father. So that's what, it's not left actually. What he did at that time, 1929, picking up the case of Ilmdeen, as Shahid said, being a politician, fighting for a united India, and yet you're starting to have this idea of a Pakistan, an Islamic state. It may not have been called Pakistan, but sufficiently starting to imagine it and putting it among the masses. So yeah, lots of myths created by liberals. Shayad is pe elaborate karna padega. I mean, we'll have to write more and talk more about it. Lots of myths created by liberals and secularists and Islamists as well about Jinnah. Yes, that he was secular and all. You should talk more about that.
Shayad, I want to get to you on that, and then Arshia can answer that as well. Now, there are two images, right? One is of a Jinnah who's fighting for Pakistan, which translates into supremacy of a particular religion, right? Which he says is going to be secular, which is an oxymoron, because if you're fighting for a particular community and their religious faith, you're saying that's going to be supreme in that land, then how can it be secular? Because other religions, by that very virtue of the idea, will be secondary and second class rather, which culminates in Pakistan's constitution as well. Now, the Islamist actually has a very good point that this is what Jinnah promised and this is what this land should be. Then there is another one where that famous speech of Jinnah that you're free to go to your temples, you're free to go everywhere. And the secularists in Pakistan, however small, however minority they might be there, they say no, but this is the man. But both is the same man, right? And that is the identity crisis which Pakistan suffers from. Now, in a very dark, twisted way, the very founder defended someone for blasphemy, where he sort of justified that, okay, sentiments were hurt and I defend Ilmdeen. And Pakistanis who indulge in blasphemy, at the drop of a hat can say, but, it's our very founder who did it. So it's justified, we're following his path. How does an average Pakistani Shahid, having grown up there, based out of there, look at Muhammad Ali Jinnah? Or does everybody look at them through their own convenience?
Oh, answering that would take a lot. I think what happened is...
You can take your time.
Yeah, that like a lot. What Jinnah did with Pakistan, Pakistan has been doing with Jinnah, in the sense that Jinnah created an illusion called Pakistan, and since then Pakistan has created an illusion called Jinnah. So to everyone, Jinnah has meant whatever they want him to mean, and the fact that that's true is because there were a lot of contradictions in his actions, in his politics. But to address that one by one, first is the logical conclusion that you've already elaborated. I mean, regardless of what he might have said that pointed towards a secular modernistic Pakistan, the fact that you're arguing in no uncertain terms that Muslims and Hindus cannot live together, and hence you're creating a separate state for Muslims, to even suggest that that was going to be secular is an absolute butchery of logic, butchery of common sense. And this would be, despite Jinnah's support for secularism. But the plot twist here is that there was never any support for secularism. He had never used the term secular once, even once in his life. There was never an argument where he condemned the idea that Pakistan is going to be anything but Islamic. He might have suggested much later and directed at foreign audience that, oh, it's not going to be a country to be run by theocrats and not a country to be run by peddlers of religion and all of that. But he was very clear in the fact that he wanted a separate Muslim homeland for Muslims where they would be free to practice their own religion. And there are countless examples of this. Again, like he said that we learned democracy through Islam. Prophet gave us the flag of the Muslim League, and he told the Muslims on a number of occasions that you should be proud of bringing bringing religion into politics. So someone who's saying that you should be proud of bringing religion into politics that is the very antipodal argument to secularism, right? Now, but where does this whole argument in support of a secular Jinnah come from? The first argument that secularists give is, again, his own personal outlook, because a person who could barely perform Islamic rituals, what was his interest in creating a Pakistan or creating any country in accordance with that? And that's absolute nonsense. You can't say that if someone has certain views or certain actions in their personal life, they can't be motivated by power, they can't be motivated by recognition, they can't be motivated by other things that we could get into, because there were a lot of other players. It wasn't just Jinnah who achieved Pakistan on his own. There he was facilitated to the very end by the Western powers. So there are many arguments to that. But sticking to Jinnah himself, what is the argument in defense of the fact that Jinnah wanted to create a secular Pakistan? The argument in defense of that is that he used Pakistan as a bargaining chip. That's the common buzzword used among the secular liberal circles, that he used Pakistan as a bargaining chip to get as much autonomy for the Muslim provinces as possible. So that he never denied, he never, as in he was using Pakistan to get as much for the Muslims, and that we wanted disparity between Muslims and Hindus and all of that. Now, the issue with that argument is that Jinnah categorically has denied on multiple occasions that the demand for Pakistan was anything but a demand for Pakistan. He has used those words that, there are people saying that this is a bargaining chip. It is not a bargaining chip. They cite a letter in 1941 that he wrote to Nawab of Patna, which is used as an argument that Lord Linlithgow, who was the viceroy at the time, that he would now understand what meaning of Pakistan movement actually is. You just need to read the Lahore Resolution and have a clear idea of what Pakistan was. It said in no uncertain terms that if Muslims and Hindus are forced to live together, it would lead to destruction of India. The man could not have been clearer that he wanted Pakistan and nothing but Pakistan. But where does the bargaining chip argument come from? The bargaining chip argument comes from writings of, for example, Aisha Jalal. Aisha Jalal has argued in support of bargaining chip. What are the primary sources of Aisha Jalal? The primary sources of Aisha Jalal are writings of the British establishment from the time, what Lord Linlithgow was saying, what his aide H.V. Hudson was saying. The bargaining chip that Pakistan was not for Jinnah, it was a bargaining chip for the British. Jinnah only wanted Pakistan. The other argument that people give to establish an idea of Jinnah being secular and the fact that Pakistan was going to be secular, because a lot of the Islamists condemned Pakistan. And they did. They condemned the idea of Pakistan. They called him, Kafir Azam and all. Maududi, founder of Jamaat-e-Islami, Hussain Ahmad Madni, the principal of Darul Uloom Deoband, and other leaders, they condemned the idea. Jamaat al-Ahrar condemned the idea of Pakistan. So if Pakistan was going to be this Islamic haven, what did these leaders have? What problems did these leaders have? It is sometimes the issues are so simple, and we go through 7 decades of history without pinpointing them. What issue did the Darul Uloom Deoband have with Pakistan? The issue that Darul Uloom Deoband had with Pakistan was that Deoband was never going to be in Pakistan. Deoband was in UP, Bareilly was in UP, which is why a lot of these influential figures did not like the fact, you are a person who is dedicated to preaching religion. Creation of Pakistan is reducing your, the number of students you can enroll. It's reducing to put it crudely, it's reducing your business. It was the movement of Pakistan was directly hitting their business, which is why which is why they condemned it. And similarly, the Ahmadiyya Muslims, they wholeheartedly supported the Pakistan movement because Qadian is 150 kilometers away from the Pakistan border. They till 1947 thought that Qadian is going to end up in Pakistan, and hence, if it's in Pakistan, and again, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the founder of Ahmadiyya Islam, was Punjabi, they envisioned Pakistan and Punjab as this new hub of Islam. Again, there's a lot of global politics into it as well, because let's not forget, after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire in 1924, till 1947, the Muslim world was without a leader. There was no Saudi Arabia. The kingdom had been formed in 1932, but they weren't the Khadiman, Hariman, Sharifan that they became after oil money came into play. So for a lot of these people, either the idea of a united India or the idea of a Pakistan, respectively, for them it was the fact that we are now going to create a new Islamic Makkah, if not the little Makkah, for the world to follow, because this part of the world constituted the largest Muslim population in the world. So that was the motivation. But what makes this argument that, Maulana Madni condemned Jinnah, or, Maududi condemned Jinnah, what makes it misleading is the fact that there were many other Islamists who wholeheartedly supported Jinnah and wholeheartedly supported Muslim League. Ashraf Ali Thanvi, he gave a fatwa that Muslim League is the sole representative of Indian Muslims. He, again, we use the term sole spokesman. It came from an Islamist argument that only Muslim League can represent the Indian Muslims. If you join Congress, if you vote for Congress, it's haram. Again, he too not only was he an Islamist, he's someone who influenced Shabir Ahmad Usmanvi, who was the founder of Jamiat Ulama-e-Islam. Him later became Pakistan Sheikhul Islam. He was the one who came with the idea of New Medina, which is where the book the title of the book Creating a New Medina comes from. Now, it is similar to Imran Khan's Riyasat al-Medina. Back then it was called Medina-e-Sani, which translates into the second Medina. So these arguments were given in support of Muslim League as well. So to just handpick certain, Islamic clerics who had their own interests at heart to say that they the Islamists as a whole condemned, that's absolute nonsense. Not only that, Muslim League not only went as far as to, echo chants like Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah. Jinnah was hearing these chants. I don't know if you got to understand what they were saying. That's a separate argument. But it was quite obvious that he was there and he was encouraging people. He might not have issued anything inflammatory himself, but a lot of the Muslim League leaders, a lot of the people on the ground were, not only peddling hatred against Hindus, they were peddling hatred against other Muslim leaders as well. This is the Unionist Party in Punjab, for example. There were posters in Lahore in 1946 that pitted Jinnah against Khizr Hayatiwana, who was the leader of the Unionist Party. That voting for Jinnah is like is voting for Jannah, voting for a better afterlife, voting for all of that, and voting for Tiwana, again talking about a Muslim here, is kufr, is I don't know, all kinds of ridiculous things. Your marriage is going to be annulled, and you can't, all that kind of nonsense. So yes, the Muslim League used Islam. Absolutely, I know I'm taking a lot of time, but to sum it up, it is a huge myth that Jinnah or Muslim League did not entertain Islamist politics. They would not have won anything without introducing Islamist politics, wholeheartedly.
In fact, secularism in those times translated meant atheism, right? La diniyat. So there is no way they could have, And secondly, Pakistan was envisioned as a replacement to the Ottoman Caliphate, because the Urdu press kept describing that sufficiently imagined idea with बाज़ाब्ता एक वो description होता था कि वहाँ के mountains, वहाँ के resources, वहाँ के आबो हवा, दरिया, all of this was thrown to the masses कि it will be a haven there, and even the diversity today that you see, the Kalash tribe, the Chitral, Gurez, and Baltistan, and and Balochis and Sindhis, the diversity was also propagated into the Urdu press. So it was supposed to be a replacement for the Ottoman Caliphate. And no chance that he would have said secularism, because in those times and still today, among the masses, Indian Muslim masses, you talk secularism and they're like, this is atheism, la diniyat. So that's kind of blasphemy for that. And yes, Shahid is right. Deoband opposed it. The opposition was not because for a united India. It was the Darul Harb and the Darul Islam. Why should we give up our graveyards and our mosques and हमारा सब कुछ तो यही है? Let's convert पूरा Hindustan into a house of Islam. So that's why they opposed it in the first place. So I don't buy that argument कि कोई patriotism था या Indian nationalism था, ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. उनको था कि हम इतना छोटा सा हिस्सा क्यों लेंगे जबकि सारा का सारा हमारा ही है. That Mughal rule is still there, so we can always bring back that rule. So the opposition by the Deobandis and the Barelvis was not because of Indian nationalism. बहुत सारे myths हैं, बहुत सारे ये हैं, but शायद really dispels all of them. Yeah.
Okay. जो मेरा नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है वो तो इस बिल्कुल क्लियर हो जाता है कि जिन्ना का बहुत खास कनेक्शन था नहीं किसी इस्लामिक आइडियोलॉजी से. तो ये जो पूरा था पार्टीशन के लिए, जो मतलब जिन्ना का पूरा जो ड्रीम था, उसका पीछे जो रीजन है उसको समझने के लिए मेरा नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है कि वो मुस्लिम हक की बात कर रहा था, बट द सेम टाइम वी लिसन अ लॉट ऑफ नॉट लिसन वी हैव लिसन अ लॉट ऑफ स्पीच जहां पे उसने मुसलमानों के सेक्रीफाइसेस की बात की है टू अचीव द ड्रीम ऑफ पाकिस्तान, विच प्रूव्स अगेन कि उसको मुस्लिम के हित का भी कुछ लेना देना नहीं था, राइट? एंड जब पावर की बात आती है तो हेलो,
we can hear you.
Go on.
अच्छा, मुझे लगा मैं कट गई वापस से. तो जब इसी बात में जब पावर की बात भी आती है तो ये जो बार्गेनिंग चिप की भी थ्योरी डाली गई थी वो इसीलिए डाली गई थी कि बताने के लिए कि अगर वो ऑफर होता तो जिन्ना शायद मान जाते, बट बाद में वो भी डिबंक हुआ कि ऐसा कुछ बात हुई नहीं थी. जब ऐसी बात हुई थी तो जिन्ना ने उसमें बिल्कुल इंटरेस्ट नहीं दिखाया था. तो क्या एक्चुअली माइंडसेट था पीछे? मुसलमानों का भला तो लगता नहीं है, क्योंकि ही वाज रेडी टू सैक्रिफाइस मुसलमान टू अचीव दैट पार्टीशन थिंग. रिलीजन से कनेक्शन, he has no such a connection to the religion. So what is the basic reason behind the creation of Pakistan? क्या dream था जिन्ना का? Which I think Shahid you can start and then Arshia we can come in.
ये आपने बड़ा एक इम्पोर्टेंट वो बात कही है. जो आपने, मैं आपको एग्जैक्ट बताऊं, March 30th 1941 addressing the Muslim Student Federation at Kanpur, Jinnah said that he was willing, and this is, I mean, he said many such things, but this is critical, and you don't find this in Pakistani press. I think the only Pakistani writer who's quoted this is Ishtiyaq Ahmad Sahab. But he said that he was willing, and these are his exact words, he's willing to perform the final last ceremony of martyrdom. This, and this is quote unquote, basically of the Muslims, because the argument always was that there would be a lot of Muslims remaining in India. So what about them? He said, well, they would be, they would be sacrificed, they would be for last ceremony of martyrdom. अब हमें पता है कि जब आप जिहाद की बात करते हैं या इस्लाम में शहादत का क्या खतरनाक एक वो है, खतरा जिहाद की हद तक, तो ये जो साहब ये कह रहे हो कि जो मुसलमान हिंदुस्तान में रह जाएंगे उनको, उनकी मैं कुर्बानी दे रहा हूँ, मेरे लिए वो शहीद हो जाएं, तो वो जाहिर है वो हिंदुस्तान के मुसलमानों के लिए तो नहीं लड़ रहा वो बंदा. और दूसरी बात ये, let's not forget that the places where he wanted to create Pakistan already had a Muslim majority. So if you're willing to sacrifice those Muslims who are in a minority, then and you're creating a country for a majority who can, even at the worst interpretation of your two-nation theory that they're going to be subjugated by Hindus and be targeted by Hindus, how are the majority in Punjab and Bengal and Sindh, and how are they going to be targeted? So this argument is obviously, it's is extremely critical to the idea that he ever had the interests of Indian Muslims ever at heart. Now, the question, why was Pakistan created in the first place? Now, there are two answers, not answers, two suggestions to where this comes. The first, obviously, is it is rooted in the Western interest. And you see Western interest in the sense that, again, global politics comes into play. Late 1940s, World War II has just ended. You are entering a new phase of Cold War, and led by the US and the Soviet Union. And for the British, you're entering a new phase of the Great Game. So what has been there for a century or so, the Great Game, to prevent Soviet expansionism southwards, you now needed a check post in the Indian subcontinent. Which, again, I'm not saying that this was all planned as it was, but there are enough reasons to think along those lines. So the idea of British presence in that part of the Indian subcontinent, which is now Pakistan, was always there. For instance, in 1945, when Winston Churchill was addressing the war cabinet, he explicitly said that we want to maintain our military interests in India. So he didn't, what shape India would have taken might not have been as important to the British, which is where the Pakistan as a bargaining chip came from, because the bargaining chip was to the Congress: if you are willing to safeguard our military interests on the Western front, we don't have to create Pakistan. So that was the bargaining chip. 1945 is also the year when Winston Churchill first uses the term Iron Curtain to divide what then became the communist sphere and the Western world, or the capitalistic sphere. So Pakistan provided the Western powers a base to safeguard their military and geopolitical interests. And again, this is a theory, but where does this theory get its credibility from? First and foremost, you have the writings of Narendra Singh Sarila, who's the aide of Mountbatten. He wrote in 1948, The Shadow of the Great Game. It's his argument. And then Ishtaq Ahmed Saab, he wrote The Garrison State. He cites him as well, and all other arguments. But again, you can reduce all of these to theories. I think the clinching argument that supports this theory is the fact that literally minutes into the creation of Pakistan, okay, maybe not minutes, but you know what I mean, days after the creation of Pakistan, one of the first things Jinnah did was he asked the US to give Pakistan $2 billion in military and financial aid and support agricultural development and all of that. Now, he's not weighing his options. He's not looking to, okay, there's a Cold War, there are powers go ahead, going head to head. I've created a new country. Maybe I should explore my options. Maybe I should look at, how best to run. One of the first things he does is that he demands or asks the US for $2 billion to support again, the only way you'd be doing that is if you know that this is the camp you belong to. And this is after the creation of Pakistan. In 1946, Jinnah sent one of his aides to Washington to convince the US, because again, let's not forget, post-Cold War, Britain had been replaced by the US as the new power of the Western world. So Jinnah now realized that maybe just convincing, just being the British powers guy wasn't enough. He had to satisfy Washington as well. So he sent one of his aides to Washington, and he said that in Pakistan, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, in Pakistan you can have your bases, you can have your entire network, and you can obviously safeguard your interests not only in the Indian subcontinent but also as far as the Middle East. So I think with these actions you realize that Pakistan had complete backing of the Western powers, and they needed that for strategic interests. But then, since we are talking about Jinnah, what was his motivation? Now, I'm not going to go into conjecture that he was a willful agent. I don't like to say something like that without sufficient evidence. Was it just some coexistence that his personal ambition to create Pakistan could be, again, like we spoke about his personal rivalries, his since I could not lead India, I'm not going to lead something else, because you read about a lot of the most influential people in history, and you dig deep into their personalities in the history, and you realize that they're motivated by the pettiest, smallest of things, and they obviously sell it as something much bigger than that. Was that the case with Jinnah? We won't know. Nobody knows other than Jinnah himself. But and again, circumstances as well. Jinnah, by the way, had a lot of political leverage in the 1940s. Again, not just because the Congress leadership was jailed. The Congress leadership had conditioned support to the British in the Second World War, to independence of India. Jinnah made no such conditions. So Jinnah was, facilitated that way as well. But the question in the 40s was, if not Jinnah, then who? And that was a valid question. There was literally nobody else who could lead a united political movement. Sir Muhammad Shafi, who was also a Muslim leader, had died in the 30s. Mia Fazli Hussain of the Unionist Party had died. Sikandar Hayat Khan had died. Allah Bakhsh Sumro, who was assassinated in 1943, the leader of Sindh Ittihad Party, he was assassinated by, and it is alleged that he was assassinated by goons affiliated with or supported by, again it's an allegation, affiliated with Muslim League. So there was nobody else to fulfill the British or the Western interest of creating something that would serve their military interests in a Muslim majority Western part of the Indian subcontinent. So Jinnah by default became the guy, which gave him the absolute. This is why he became arrogant in his politics later on as well, because he realized that, well, if they want this, they have no other option. So that's probably one of the reasons why it was Jinnah who ended up leading this movement.
Shahid, he regretted creating Pakistan later. If you go by Margaret Burke's interview, or is that also a myth? Because she did. She wrote in Life magazine, and he was an old, frail man. I think he was sunning himself on a deck chair or something, and she asked him. That's what I've read. Margaret Burke White, she was a Life magazine photographer. The last interview.
He was old and frail, yes, but I don't think he ever. I mean, I don't think he ever. I personally to suggest that Jinnah regretted.
She doesn't say so much, but she says I asked him whether he regretted, and it wasn't an answer he gave, but I think she was reading his body language or something.
Well, I'm sorry, I haven't read the interview, so I can't comment on that.
I'll send you a link.
Jinnah's actions after the creation of Pakistan. You see, we discussed the famous speech as well. I think I did not address that earlier as well. And, well, after all of that, why say you're free to go to your temples and all of that? First of all, ironically, the defenders of a secular Jinnah use this argument to support Jinnah, right? That he said the reason you had to say you're free to go to your temples was because there was an argument that made Hindus and the Christians worried that what is going to happen to us. Yes. If there was Pakistan, secular Pakistan, progressive Pakistan would have been obvious. No, but you would not have to tell the Hindus or the Christians that their security is ensured. And the reason he said those things was not for the Pakistani audience. It was, that the August 11, 1947 Constituent Assembly speech had a heavy presence of international media, foreign delegates. They wanted to sit and see what kind of Pakistan we're going to create and listen. Again, going back to the argument of it being a Western project, if not completely, but definitely supported by the Western powers, you needed to sell a relatively, progressive Pakistan to the Western powers as well, because they were supposed to justify it to their voters as well, right? You had the Labour Party win the elections in the UK. You had, obviously, in the US, you had to justify that someone's asking for $2 billion. Are we supporting a jihadi project? And you see, Musharraf did the same thing as well, which is why I say everything. Musharraf sold the idea of a moderate, enlightened moderation, liberal path. And Musharraf is considered this liberal progress. And even in India, Indian liberals believe Musharraf was this secular leader who the whole has said on record many times that we supported Lashkar-e-Taiba, we supported Jaish Mohammed and all of that. So he was playing to that gallery as well. So that is something we need to consider as well. And again, I believe that the idea of a secular Jinnah actually makes Jinnah look worse as a person. And hear me out, please. If you argue that he was using Pakistan as a bargaining chip for what? The very concept of bargaining chip is that you are open to both possibilities. So let's for a moment assume that he was just peddling all this hatred against Hindus. He was creating so much division, so much hostility between Hindus and Muslims of the Indian subcontinent, or for a bargaining chip. Doesn't it make Jinnah look better to paint it someone who had absolutely no other vision other than the creation of Pakistan? So creating a secular Jinnah actually makes Jinnah look a much worse person. It might make him look, Muslim supremacist. It might make him look like an Islamist politician, but still give him some consistency in politics. And I think the reason, again, going back to the creation of illusion of Jinnah in Pakistan, I think a lot of the liberal intelligentsia in Pakistan see their own selves in Jinnah, right? Complete detachment from Islam, complete detachment from the average Pakistani, complete detachment from the average Muslim, complete detachment from Islamic rituals. But the justification to support Muslim causes around the world, to shout Islamophobia around the world, to because if Jinnah, if Jinnah is wrong, then Pakistan is wrong, and if Pakistan is wrong, how do you sell yourself as a well-wisher of Pakistan? That is one of the biggest questions. So you needed to create a secular Jinnah for you to suggest that there is no contradiction between a secular Pakistani and someone who has the interests of Pakistan at heart. And my argument has always been, you can be a secular Pakistani, you can be a well-wisher of Pakistan, you can support a progressive Pakistan, while at the same time arguing that Pakistan should not have been created. That's the greatest paradox. But it's there. Pakistan is there. Pakistan is not going anywhere. You can argue that the divisive politics should not have been there. You don't have to make excuses for the Pakistan movement to make Pakistan a better place, is what I'm saying.
I wanted to ask you, add on that, and Shahid can come in first, and then Arshia can join that.
1 second. Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
In Shahid. So it was very interesting that Shahid was telling that Western interest was there in entire thing. So do you guys know about Khaksar movement?
Yes.
Yeah, so that even indicate that, and I think that would be very interesting for our audience to know what happened and how a Muslim formed an entire army organization to kill Jinnah, so there won't be a partition of India. I think that would be very interesting thing. If you can elaborate, Arshia di, aap karo ya fir Shahid karo.
Shahid, you want to go ahead with Khaksar movement?
I think it was in the 1930s that there's a movement to I think I'm not entirely sure, but
so 9th June 47 they even attacked on Jinnah to kill him. So it was a movement by the Muslim, the group of the Muslim, and they wanted to assassinate Jinnah, so partition ho hi na India ka, and the British were the one who saved Jinnah, and it is a history, and it but बहुत famous nahi hai, but it is written by very well read historian also. So they saved Jinnah and they called those Khaksar movement fascist group. And the interesting thing is that कि इतना लड़ने के बाद जब partition हुआ तो फिर उसके leader वो सब पाकिस्तान भी चले गए because they said कि अब तो हो गया, अब क्या कर.
The movement led by Allama Mashriqi, yes, I think that was early 1940s, tried to kill him at his residence in Bombay. Again, that's the thing. हम जो पहले बात कर रहे थे वो उसी से मोटिवेटेड था. इन सब ग्रुप्स के अपने इंटरेस्ट. खाकसार मूवमेंट वाले भी पाकिस्तान चले गए थे. जमात इस्लामी हिंद बन गया, जमात इस्लामी पाकिस्तान बन गया, जमीयत उलमा इस्लाम भी हिंद बन गया, पाकिस्तान बन गया. सो ये उसी से, बिकॉज देखें इस्लामिस्ट का मसला ये था कि हमारी जो इस्लाम की, अगेन फिर उस तरह बोलूं तो इस्लाम की जो हमारी दुकान है वो हम किस तरह उसको बेहतरीन तरीके से चला सकते हैं. तो अब खाकसार मूवमेंट ने इसको सबसे रेडिकल वो ले लिया कि जी वो कत्ल करने की कोशिश कर दी जिन्ना को. बट ये वही आर्ग्यूमेंट, बल्कि ये आपने अच्छा जिक्र किया कि ये अक्सर ये लोग साइट भी करते हैं. जी देखें उनको तो मारने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, इतना वो सेक्युलर पाकिस्तान बनाना चाह रहे थे कि उनको वो जो है ना जो. बट खाकसार को आप डायरेक्टली वो नहीं कह सकते कि मतलब उनका कोई थियोलॉजिकल मोटिवेशन उस तरह से नहीं था. उनका बस अपने ही इंटरेस्ट वही था. उनको यही था कि जी मुस्लिम बट जाएंगे, और वो जो कि अगेन बहुत सारे मुसलमानों की ये सोच थी कि मुसलमानों को नहीं बटना चाहिए, क्योंकि लॉजिकली आप सोचें तो एक सही सोच है, लेकिन उसके लिए मैं कत्ल तो नहीं जस्टिफाई करूंगा, लेकिन ये काफी लोगों की सोच थी कि अगर मतलब ना रहेगा बांस और ना बजेगी बांसुरी वाला सिलसिला था कि अगर जिन्ना साहब, वही आर्ग्यूमेंट, क्योंकि और कोई था नहीं लीड करने के लिए मूवमेंट, तो अगर जिन्ना साहब को आप रास्ते से हटा देंगे तो फिर शायद पाकिस्तान मूवमेंट खत्म हो जाए, जो कि मेरा ख्याल में नहीं हो. मेरा मानना है कि जिन्ना साहब होते ना होते, क्योंकि मगरबी दुनिया को यहाँ पे अपनी जो बेसिस बनानी थी, तो वो कुछ ना कुछ करके यहाँ पे अपने आप को तो ले आते, with or without Jinnah, with or without Muslim League, with or without the Pakistan.
Wasn't there an option with Maulana Abdul Kalam? Couldn't they have picked him up, or they knew that he had Indic? He was very much grounded in the Indic civilization.
Or into Indian nationalism too. I mean, although Jinnah took a bold face. So I mean, but maybe he was more consistent. He preferred to remain consistent with his ideals. That could be one argument. But plus, you needed someone who could influence matters on the Western front. So that's also an important factor. But yeah, again, some the Unionist Party could have taken the lead, or someone else, or even you could have offered something to the Indian All India Congress. And I don't know, this is all parallel history. We can talk about possibilities till the end of time, but yeah.
No,
what
about
happened
this
was
thing that there was no leader, because Frontier Gandhi was there and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan was there, Maulana Abdul Kalam. Because in India, these are the people they are trumpeted that they were Indian nationalists. They fought for Indian nationalism. They were not for the creation of Pakistan. So when
That's
you
the
say
beauty.
that there was nobody else, I'm thinking maybe some.
That's the beauty of the creation of Pakistan as a strategic goal, because NWFP, erstwhile NWFP, which is now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, was the only place where Muslim League did not actually win the majority of the Muslim votes. It was a sweeping victory for them in 1946. And again, geostrategically, NWFP, the then NWFP, was the most significant because again, bordering Afghanistan and bordering Central Asia. So that there's that. But then at the same time, what is also interesting is that Sindh was actually the only part of what is now Pakistan where the Muslim League actually formed the government in 1946. They did not form the government in Punjab. They did not form the government in NWFP. And that's the reality. The two epicenters of the Pakistan movement, UP and Bengal, are no longer in Pakistan. One was never in Pakistan, the other is no longer in Pakistan. And I believe, and you need a whole different discussion on this altogether. I think we conveniently, I don't know, conveniently or for what reason, we completely ignore the role that Bengal played in the creation of Pakistan. We are just focused on the Aligarh movement. We just focused on Sir Sayyid, Iqbal, Jinnah. We completely forget the role that, I mean, without the partition of Bengal in 1905, there would be no Pakistan. There could not have been any Pakistan. Muslim League was founded in 1906 at Dhaka. Nawab Salimullah, I mean, not just the partition of Bengal, the reaction of someone like Nawab Salimullah and other Muslim leaders to the partition, where there's spreading anti-Hindu hatred. You had publications like Lal Ishtihar, which was a complete anti-Hindu document arguing this is how Muslims should do what Muslims should do to Hindus. And then once the partition of Bengal was annulled in 1911, the reaction to that, it produced Bengali politicians like A.K. Fazlul, and then obviously Khwaja Nazimuddin as well, the second Governor General of Pakistan, and then you had the direct action day in 46 in Bengal, the then Bengal. So the role that Bengal is integral to the creation of Pakistan, but that's not what's discussed as much as it should be, as far as my opinion goes.
Right, Shahid, as much as I've observed Pakistan and the idea of Pakistan since childhood, and you're someone who's brought up in Pakistan, works out of Pakistan, so you're the ideal person to ask this. For an average Pakistani, what I understand is, I mean, beyond the elite and who wants to have a certain sanitized version of Jinnah, he or she, for the right or for the wrong, but let's talk just logical stuff, is very clear about the two nations theory. That Muslims as a race are very different from Hindus, and hence, playing the devil's advocate, logically, he or she might argue that the very wajood, bunyad, is anti-Hindu, anti-Hindu. Pakistan, it translates into being anti-Hindu majority India, right? Now, that is one question I want to understand from you, that is that the position of the average Pakistani mind? Second, what is the problem people like you face, liberals, progressives, who want to tell them, listen, I don't want to bash the country, but then the very structural foundation is a problem. That is why we are into this position where, first we went for the Hindus, then Christians, then Sikhs, the Parsis, the Jews, the Ahmadiyya, Shias, and because it is one of supremacy, so at every point it will go for someone who it thinks it's not supreme enough, right? So what do voices like you and someone who I've lately been following, and I'm a big fan of Syed Muzammil, how much of traction does a Syed Muzammil or a Kunwar Khuldene Shahid have, and how much of the current generation is willing to understand that yes, we need to face that. It's a very tough thing. It's an existential problem we'll have when we'll face the very issue that the foundation is problematic, and that is a very that can be really cathartic, right? Because you're like, you know what, India is right. You guys chose the wrong idea. So on these two positions, I want to understand that. How do you see it as a Pakistan?
Okay, first of all, I am someone who has absolutely zero traction, and Sayyid Muzammil is someone who has a lot of traction, and that is a good thing. That signals the fact that there is a change in thought. I mean, if you follow his podcast, if you follow what he's saying, he's one of the most prominent, brutally honest, progressive thinkers, and he had, again, not only just someone who's brutally honest, he at the same time enjoys a lot of following. So that is a huge plus point. And I think what differentiates him with a lot of the other progressive thinkers especially of the past, he is the fact that he will not mince his words. You know what you and I are calling logic is logic. Pakistan was based on an anti-Hindu idea. It's not a Hindutvadi conspiracy. It's not an Islamist delusion. It is a fact. The two-nation theory, again, you need to understand that the two-nation theory not only said that Muslims and Hindus are two different communities. You could argue that Muslims and Hindus are different as people. Shias and Sunnis are also different. People can be different. Difference is not the problem. The second half of the two-nation theory is the problem, that Hindus and Muslims are different and cannot live together. That was the problematic bit, and that was constantly rammed in by Jinnah and the Muslim League. So the foundation of Pakistan absolutely was anti-Hindu. There is simply anyone with an ounce of honesty and integrity cannot dispute that. Okay, so where do we move from this? Pakistan was anti-Hindu. So the only two options were: you justify anti-Hindu sentiments, or you say that Pakistan should not have been created, which is the easier option. That option has been followed for the past 76 years. And a lot of people like to say, oh, well, Jinnah Islamized Pakistan, and a lot of nonsense was put into the Pakistan studies books and all of that. What you call nonsense is the argument that was peddled by the Muslim League. The idea that Muhammad bin Qasim was the first Pakistani was not something that people in the 1980s Pakistan just thought one day that, hang on, let's call him the first. That's all literature from the Muslim League politics in the 40s. What the liberals basically call that was the rhetoric that was being sold, and it was all anti-Hindu. And Mahmud Ghaznavi, the whole idea, the veneration of temple vandalization, the idea that the office, again, we can go into all the details of how Islamic supremacy takes place. That is etched in, unfortunately, I take absolutely no pleasure in saying this, that is etched in the creation of Pakistan. Now to the question, how do we come out of it? One way of coming out of it is to create a new fairy tale, because as nations, you need fairy tales, right? You need to come up. You can't form nationhood based on, oh, well, this nation should never have been created. That's not a particularly easy to sell idea, right? So you need to come up with something more palatable, something more, you need to sweeten the deal. One way of changing that would be we were concerned about what would happen to the Muslims of India being a minority. So we decided to create another country as a means to safeguard a minority. So you twist the argument, although this was contradict much of what the Muslim League was doing. But again, as an argument, as a new fairy tale, you sell the creation of Pakistan as an idea of creating a country to protect a minority. Again, a million loopholes in this argument, but at least this would serve to create a more tolerant Pakistan. So that's one argument. The other thing, I believe that, yes, you need a popularly imagined nationhood. For that, you need the fairy tale. But you need the progressives and the the dissenters, to first and foremost be honest about the problem. The problem is the ideology itself. So you need both parallel movements where you acknowledge that this should not have happened. You highlight that what Jinnah did was absolutely wrong. You stop painting him as an angel, whether that angel is Islamic or liberal. You realize that Pakistan came into being again, you can throw in the Western power argument as well, that, oh, we've always been dependent on them. And that's been the case in the 40s. You can blame it on the West, you can blame it on anyone else. But to remove the anti-Hindu sentiment and in turn the anti-India sentiment, you need to categorically condemn the two-nation theory. You can't say, in Pakistan, someone like Ramesh Wankwani, who is the representative of the Hindu Council of Pakistan, he is unfortunately compelled, even he is compelled to say that, yeah, the two-nation theory, there's nothing wrong with that. But then he would say that Pakistani Hindus can still form a Pakistani identity. So these are the contradictions that we face right now. But I think I'm sorry if I'm forgetting some part of your question, but what I would want to highlight over here is that, because you highlighted the influence of someone like Sayyid Muzammil, things are changing. Just to give you a small example of how ideologically things are changing. One major difference, and I think this is something I discussed with Arshia in one of the spaces as well. One major difference is the success of India compared to the failures of Pakistan. Again, I don't take any pleasure in saying this. I am a Pakistani. I've always lived in Pakistan. I will always live in Pakistan. I consider myself as my origin, of course, Indian. I mean, we all Pakistanis are, whether we like to admit that or not. But the disparity in the stature of India and Pakistan has forced a rethink. Another reason that has forced a rethink is the growing unpopularity of the Pakistan army. Again, Imran Khan has a role in that inadvertently. Imran Khan is not leading an ideological awakening, but his clash with the military has forced a lot of people in Pakistan to rethink the narratives that have been peddled by the army for the past 7 decades. But to give you a small example of that, if any of you guys ever have time, just go to Dawn's Facebook page. Dawn, of course, is the most followed English newspaper in Pakistan. Go to their Facebook page, see one of their posts from September 21st, which is, our day of recording is yesterday. And it quotes Anwarul Haq Kakar, who's the caretaker Prime Minister, his speech at the United Nations General Assembly, where he's saying, quote unquote, that the world should realize something along the lines of the world should realize the international threat of Hindu extremism. Now, something like this a couple of years ago would be completely lapped up in Pakistan. You would be like, yeah, you're right, you're doing. But you go through the comment section right now when you have time, and you have Pakistani after Pakistani after Pakistani commenting, please focus on Pakistan. Please stop selling this manjan. Please, look at what is happening to Pakistan. Please stop worrying about India, all of these things. This was unthinkable a couple of years ago. So again, this is not a result of any ideological metamorphosis. It's just the fact that we have reached a point where there is no other option but to accept that everything, all narratives that have culminated in where Pakistan is today, they were all horrendously wrong, whether they were wrapped in the Islamic argument or they were wrapped in the liberal argument. You need a complete, break from all those arguments.
Overhauling.
Right. And that is it. Slowly, yes. Yes.
I like the stance that Shahid is showing, that you can condemn the creation of Pakistan, but at the same time fight with all your might for a secular, liberal, progressive Pakistan. I think that's the only stance which is the way forward.
Right. Arshia, I wanted to ask you a question tangentially related to what Shahid said. There was this thing last year, Harbhajan Singh, who's a famous cricketer from our side, was there with Shoaib Akhtar, and Harbhajan Singh said, I see no difference between us, and all these things are, he was all like, blurred about it. But whereas the Pakistan mind is very clear about it, right? And that instance showed that how focused Shoaib Akhtar was, and Shoaib Akhtar said, and he said, there's no difference. And Shoaib said, no, I do believe the two-nation theory. And it was Harbhajan who came across this, guy who was not clear about what he believed in, right? But Shoaib Akhtar was very clear in saying that I believe in the two-nation theory, and Harbhajan was just like, he came across like a fool. Now, a lot of nationalists here, Arshia, on our side of the border in India, say that leave aside what Shoaib is. He's liked by good sections as a sportsperson. He's not liked by, so that's secondary. But ideologically, he was so focused about that thing, right? That we are not same. And Bhaji was the one who was all like blurred about it. No, no, we are all same and all that. And they say when the similar voices come from India, that you too need to be as focused as the average Pakistani is. That when you're looking at it as an ideology, I'm not saying person to person. Person to person, there are good relations, bad relations, amazing relations. But they are very clear, right? ये enemy है. वो जब ये लोग यहाँ कहते हैं हाँ ये भी enemy है, these guys here get tagged as being extremists, which I feel is very unfair towards them. How do you see that?
I have been watching this, and since I talk to the right wingers also, I think this new concept is coming up about Shatru Bodh, because they're
Yeah.
learning from Islamism. They are seeing how they close the ranks, irrespective of whether you're a believing Muslim or not, irrespective of whether you're left or right or center. But the way they close ranks, as you said, they're very, very clear about who the enemy is, what is our goal, what is the motivation, what is the objective here. So India has now started, that cultural revival jo hai. I call it a cultural revival, the Hindu resurgence. I see no issues with it. This is something even V.S. Naipaul said, when the Babri Masjid happened, that this was bound to happen. This is it's a civilizational thing. Shahid shares his name with Ibn Khuldun, the father of sociology. And Ibn Khuldun also said the rise and fall of civilization. So I believe it's that, India's this rise and fall and the churning that is happening. I think they're getting clear about it. कि this भज्जी का जो आपने कहा कि I call it the अमन की आशा approach, वो नहीं चलेगा, because time and again that bleeding India with 1,000 cuts वो actually reality है. It came to our living rooms, as we also, pro-Indian Kashmiris started speaking, and we said it's a reality for us. Bleeding India with 1,000 cuts, would cut actually mein hai. We have lost people in every household in the valley. So I think I am in support of that. The Shatru Bodh thing that they have. You need, and it's not just limited to Islamists. They feel the West, this conversion, Christian expansion project jo hai, so many things. It's a part of that cultural revival, post-colonial thing. So I am, it makes us look like fools, when this Bhaji episode that you talk about, the Pakistani players are very clear. Pakistani musicians are very clear. When this whole controversy erupted, I think I forgot what it was about, and Fawad Khan just packed up and left. He didn't even care whether the films were done or not. So बहुत clear कि भाई, वो ties, वो cultural ties नहीं रखनी है and everything. हम में वो नहीं है. वो इसलिए नहीं है because the ethos of India is like that. The ethos of the Hindu religion is like that. That tolerance is always that. But it's changing now. I think the geopolitical realities are making them change. You still have a lot of Hindus opposing their own people, saying we are not like this. This is don't become Islamist. Don't copy the Islamists. We can't. We don't have the concept of monotheism. We don't have the concept of this one thing. One करके ऐसे नहीं, diversity है हमारे में. But then they've also realized the fact that India is being put down a lot because of this. So I am in complete support of that, क्योंकि मेरे लिए तो हमेशा territorial integrity is first and foremost. It's not just about borders, it's about the internal insurgencies inside. And I do visit a lot of Chota Pakistans, we have them, Muslim ghettos. They may not be flying the Pakistan flag, but that sentiment is there. And the same mistakes of 1940s में थी, as I said, not sufficiently imagined. It's like communist जो होता है, there is no border of a communist state कहीं पे, right? But they always vie to become communists. Or it's like Buddhism. Somebody starts vowing कि I'm going to follow the teachings of Buddha. तो है नहीं कहीं पे वो religion कहीं पे. It's just a vague idea. But since you vow to become that, वो है. So if an Indian Muslim is living in India and he's in this Muslim ghetto, that idea that I need to have a region, या मेरा अपना जो neighborhood मोहल्ला है, it has to be governed by Sharia laws. It will be governed by Islamist supremacy. That makes it a Pakistan. So Shatru Bodh अगर नहीं होगा, it's a concept I'm still exploring with the Hindu right wing. होना चाहिए. You'll have to, and Muslims will have to start adapting to it also. Okay, who actually is the enemy? करना पड़ेगा.
Right. So the last question today, Shahid, and I'll just take off from where Arshia left. And a lot of intellectuals here have also argued that Pakistan, at the end of the day, is not a geographical entity. It's a state of mind. It's an idea, right? and that of course is there in Pakistan, and then it still exists in some pockets in India, right? So how do you see both these things, Shahid? I mean, when it comes to cricket, when it comes to person interactions, friendships, they are there. But when the critical mass of Pakistan and sections of India are very clear that no, the enmity and the ideological foundations is very anti there. So a lot of times there is this dichotomy, right? Like, it gets argued, but look at them, they're appreciating Kohli, and a lot of people here argue that people appreciate like a Shaheen Afridi, and all hell will break loose. But at the same time, the critical mass of Pakistan is also very clear about the two nations. How have you seen this as a Pakistani since childhood play out? Like, person to person relations are great. There is appreciation for Indian hero, superstars, Shah Rukh Khan, Amitabh Bachchan, cricketers. But as a nation, they're clear, nay, this is an enemy. So how does this work in a Pakistani mind?
Yeah, just to answer your question, but just to add something before that. I mean, personally, I am not a fan of Muslim nationalism, but I'm also not a fan of Hindu nationalism. I have a very, my idea of secularism is very laissez in the way that I believe that all religious expressions should be limited to one's personal space or to the worship place. So any idea that expresses religious nationalism, whether that's Muslim nationalism, whether it's Jewish nationalism, whether that's Hindu nationalism, I personally do not support it. And I've been a critic of many developments in India. I'm not here to tell 3 Indians what their country is like. I'm absolutely not interested in doing that. But this is critical to what I'm going to say. And this is critical to answering your question as well. The idea that, well, you can support Kohli in Pakistan, but you will get a lot of backlash for supporting Shaheen Shah Afridi. I don't know what you would say to that. As of today, there is some truth to that. But my contention here is, what is the root of that? The root of that is that and this is something I argue with a lot of my fellow liberals in Pakistan. The issue between India and Pakistan, first and foremost, is the military's imagined parity with India, right? Country 5 times bigger, 6 times bigger population. You can't have parity with that country, geopolitically, geostrategically. But even the liberal argument, and this liberals in both India and Pakistan are guilty of, they like to argue that there is some parity between India and Pakistan in terms of religious extremism as well. And despite the fact that I criticize a lot of things which obviously Arshia does not like, a lot of things that are happening in India, I would never, even in my wildest imagination, think about creating parity between India and Pakistan on the ideological, even in terms of, let alone in terms of religious extremism. There are 300,000 mosques in India, right? Multiple times more than Pakistan. The number of Hindu temples created in Pakistan over the past 76 years is 0. How can you have, and that's just one example. We're having this conversation today, there are multiple mosques being built in India, renovated in India. So the very idea that there can be, that the idea that our extremists are the same, the level of extremism in India and Pakistan is the same, is laughable. Another example, if for any reason a Muslim in India is denied their right to perform the Qurbani on Eid, whatever the reason, that person is breaching the Indian constitution. If in Pakistan you deny an Ahmadi Muslim the right to perform the Qurbani, that person is following the Pakistani constitution. Huge difference. But again, the point that I'm trying to make over here is, by creating this parity, the hyper-nationalists in Pakistan, it's very, like we discussed earlier, it's very clear. For the hyper-nationalists in Pakistan, India is the enemy, Hindu is the enemy. Everything wrong in Pakistan is India's doing. The separation of East Pakistan was an Indian conspiracy. Everything is a raw Zionist Hindu conspiracy. What's happening is Balochistan is India's conspiracy. Taliban, when we don't like them, become Indian agents sponsored by India. The hyper-nationalist is very clear. Again, nonsensically, completely devoid of any truth, but consistent. India is the enemy, hence everything wrong in Pakistan is happening because of India. The liberals, on the other hand, are fully aware of what Pakistan has done in India, right? It's, they might not be willing to criticize Jinnah, they might not be willing to criticize the two-nation theory, but they know who was behind the Mumbai attacks. They know who Hafiz Saeed is. They know who Zakir Rahman Lakhvi is. They know who Masood Azhar is. They know what happened in Pathankot, Uri. They know about the assembly attack in 2001, so on and so forth. They know all of that. But then at the same time, they wonder why there is anti-Pakistan sentiment in India. Well, if you know what Pakistani state has been doing in India, you acknowledge that. And it's not just, let's not forget, it's not just this fringe liberal Pakistani section that is aware of it. People like Nawaz Sharif, 3-time Prime Minister of Pakistan, on record saying who's behind Mumbai attacks. People like Asad Durrani, ISI chiefs, people are acknowledging it. If Pakistan has been doing that in India, why should there not be anti-Pakistan sentiment in India? Again, in an ideal world, of course, we should be able to admire. Kohli should be playing in Lahore. Shaheen Shah Afridi should have fans in Delhi and Mumbai and Kolkata and all those places. But I think the fact that there is such a disconnect between the liberal arguments and the reality that they realize, even Indian liberals know that Pakistan has been up to that. And yet they create the disparity of Pakistan between India and Pakistan. Pakistan liberals do the same as well. Just to give you an example, you gave a cricket example. That was the 2021 World Cup in T20 World Cup in UAE, where before that Jishwar Bakhtar and Vajan had that argument. The same World Cup, India beats Pakistan for the first time. My apologies, for the first time in World Cup history. Pakistan beats India for the first time in World Cup history. And this is critical, and this will answer your question categorically. One of the comments in reaction to that victory was Waqar Yunus praising Muhammad Rizwan for praying namaz in front of his court. He could have been praising him for offering the namaz. I'm not a fan of religious expressions, regardless of the religion. But you can appreciate them for forming the namaz, for being such Muslims, for thanking Allah at every single instance. You can praise them for that. He specifically said, and this was in Urdu, उसने बड़ा अच्छा किया हिंदुओं के बीच में उसने नमाज पढ़ी. Now, again, obviously, the next day he issued an apology.
The apology
is more like, इतनी तो कोई बड़ी बात. Again, the sentiment was that इतनी तो कोई बड़ी बात नहीं थी, लेकिन चलें आपको बुरा लग गया तो sorry. It's not even a concept in Pakistan, but that to say something like that is a big deal. But I think the most this would answer your question. The most illuminating comment came from Harsha Bhogle. Harsha Bhogle's tweet came before Waqar Yunus's apology. Harsha used the terms, I'm paraphrasing, but like it's hurtful to read something like this, hear something like this from such a legend of the game. He said something like, we are taught to we downplay such things, and there is the problem. There is the problem that no matter what, Jinnah, even 76 years later, is secular because that's what the liberal imagination wants him to be. Musharraf was liberal because that's what we want them to be. If any Pakistani has an Islamist worldview, that's you try and justify that, and that is why we as Muslims, whether as Indian or Pakistani, or I would include other parts of the world as well, we do not look within and we do not hold our own selves accountable, because there are people around the world looking to make excuses on our behalf, whether that's touting even the Taliban as freedom fighters, whether that's touting every jihadist attack as having nothing to do with Islam, whether that's saying that things that are integral to the Islamic theology are somehow just some Western, somehow the West's fault or someone else's fault. I think that's the issue. We need self-accountability, and for that we need more Muslims to own our own issues. That does not make us self-hating people. That does not make us people who are enemies of the Muslim community, of the Muslim world, or of Pakistan, or of the Indian Muslim community. I think that needs to change. That's I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what
Right. No, that was very interesting one. Arshia, ending comments from you?
I wanted to, Shahid is right when he says that Pakistanis don't understand why India has this sentiment against them now. I think Farhan Jafri's tweet comes in my mind. He wrote a long form tweet. Farhan Jafri is the counterterrorism expert, right? I believe he has Pakistani origins, but he's in Britain, I think. And he wrote that, a normal state would always, any state which is actively working against its people, the Mumbai attacks and everything, uh, Pakistani should understand why India doesn't want to talk to them. Any normal state would, because that is, like in Pakistan, terrorism has become so normalized, so normal. They can play cricket with Taliban, they can play football with Taliban while their soldiers are getting killed also. So I think this sums up what Shahid was saying. Pakistanis don't understand, and wo yahi hai, because that self-reflection is not there, that accountability is not there. But being very objective here, I still feel it's the atmosphere of all these 70 years, the textbooks, the upbringing, and the narrative. I mean, I was surprised to learn that Pakistanis are taught they have won all the wars against India. If you grow up in such a environment, you are bound to think the way that most of them think. And now, because of the internet, that the narratives are coming from across the border, from us, and we are speaking, and now they're realizing even Indian Muslims are speaking up. So maybe those, those changes that Shahid talks about are happening. लेकिन एक सोसाइटी जो बहुत ही नॉर्मल समझती है कि it's terrorism, why aren't they talking to us, ये तो होता रहता है. I mean, that it will take time. It will take a lot of time. We've seen it in Kashmir as well. Remember the early days of the militancy, the terrorism? Ours were not believed to pick up AK-47. I always refer to that Al Farhan kidnapping. I mean, they couldn't even think that Kashmiri militants would do it. Beheading to sawal hi nahi. But then you fast forward to 2020s, right? When Zakir Musa said he's going to behead them, and actually literally did. So that's a huge change. It's a huge change. And again, it's Pakistan military sponsored. तो काफी टाइम लगेगा and शायद के साथ स्पेस करते हुए we always have this thing कि अगर हम डायलॉग कर रहे हैं कंस्ट्रक्टिव होना चाहिए, and that many people want unification. I go to spaces and there are always these, I call them the useful idiots, they say merger and everything. I said, realistically speaking, what merger are you talking about? We would love to have those cultural ties and economic ties, and as an economic bloc, yes, Shahid, I would absolutely support a South Asian bloc, considering if we also are against the West and everything. Like, realistically, as I told you, a lot of blood between us, a lot of blood. I mean, it's even the fact of talking of a merger or talking of a unification, or even of talking just about cultural ties, it's not going to find much traction. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's true. On a lighter note, Shahid, that Muslim thing is a larger problem. No, I keep on joking that introspection ka opposite is Muslim. that's a larger Muslim mindset problem that we have. Introspection वो क्या होता है? Introspection, अरे हम तो victim है हर जगह दुनिया में, दुनिया ही तो हमारे साथ गलत कर रही है, तो
सही है, बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं.
So, but that's changing, like I said, to see someone like Syed Muzammil drawing so much traction in Pakistan, that makes me really hopeful, in the sense that at least खुद की country सुधर जाए, and then at least you can talk to people like Syed Muzammil, right? Because at the end of the day, he'll make a better society, and he would ensure that that mindset will change towards not being anti-India, rather, indulging in truth and reconciliation, even voices like you. But yeah, kudos to voices like you, who of course want a better place for their country, want a better place with their neighbor, which affects us directly. So if there are thousands like you and Syed Muzammil, hopefully in the next 3 decades, things would be better than what they've been for 70 years.
Why I respect Shahid so much is, I'm going to quote Arshad here. I had asked him once, how is it possible that, we had just started, I was writing for The Nation and Shahid was editing my pieces and everything. Arshad had started writing and then others had started joining. I said, how is it possible that a person like Shahid exists? He said, you know how it is. The more messier it is, it's like he gave the example of the lotus flower. So my respect for Shahid is this: it's very difficult for you, Shahid, to speak the way you do, or to write the way you do, or for that matter, the other Pakistani liberals, considering how few you are. For us, it's not a big thing here. Like I said, I have constitutional advantage over you. I can still free-thinkingly speak and advocate any kind of thing here because I am protected by the constitution of my country. It's difficult for you. And I understand how difficult it is for you. Although my whole work is about silenced voices in India, among the Muslims and everything. But Shahid, I mean, I don't want to use the cliche, but inspirational, very inspirational. Sometimes there are dark days, and sometimes, you know, you face a lot of obstacles while you're working. Then I remember you, all of you there, you know, Pakistani liberals and all, and how difficult it must be. So I sincerely hope that, you know, the struggle of yours for a progressive Pakistan, you know, forget a liberal, progressive Pakistan, where they start believing economic, progress is the first goal that any nation should have. Because if you have economic progress, then you're able to, you know, have the luxury of liberalism and secularism.
Hopefully, slightly sooner than the 3 decades that Khalid is predicting. Slightly sooner than that.
No,
but
I'm
yeah.
just being realistic, bro. Just being
It's a
realistic.
terrible- Even 3 decades for many would be like, oh, that's too soon. That's what
Exactly. But you know, even amongst the liberals, I've found such intellectual honesty with the likes of Syed Muzammil, with you, even to some extent Junaid Akram, and you know, all these people who are doing such wonderful job, that they're very clear that, you know, now let's just talk about the root cause. Yeah, ideology में कुछ problem है, but let's work for the country, because you know, एक और एक इंडस्ट्री खड़ी हुई है where, you know, Pakistanis who know कि अच्छा traction मिलेगा, let's bash the country ऐसे, you know, and then just like, you know, we will get this thing. But you guys, at the end of the day, still are very clear that no, we want a better place for the people here, you know, and that is noteworthy. And it's not like, you know, like false equivalence draw की जा रही है, you know, अब बाहर इंडिया के हमारे viewers खुश हो जाएंगे and all that. So that is very admirable, and you guys do it from a sense of balance and taking into perspective human sensitivities along with the rationality. So I think that has our respect, and we hope to see you more now and you know, talk on various topics. So thank you so much, Shahid. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was an immense pleasure, and we would love to be back soon. Definitely. Yeah, thank you.
And Arshia, yeah, our viewers keep on saying that Arshia zyada aati nahi. So viewers, it's not our fault. Arshia is super busy, so we will call her. We'll tell you why. This topic we bulaya tha, Arshia.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. And sadly, 20 minutes back, Amana had to drop off because there was some network issues. And thank you so much. Please do like, share, and subscribe, and keep giving us the love, support, even the criticism, which needs to be civil. बाकी गालियां वाले हम देखते नहीं हैं नीचे. So thank you so much. It was a great episode.